What is up, boxing fans, everyone, FightHype fans alike? Well, they are one and the same. Anyways, trip through this intro because I was going to go live fresh off the plane. I got home from Jake Paul's fight with Anderson Silva down there in Glendale, Arizona. Hold on, mute this real quick. But I actually got down back home off the plane 8 o'clock in the morning yesterday morning. I was going to go straight with the Z cap then, but I wanted to really get some fresh eyes, get some rest, and really watch Lomachenko's fight, all 12 rounds. I only caught the first half of the fight because I was covering Jake Paul's fight live. And then I didn't get to see Diaz and Zepeda, and I didn't get to see Katie Taylor. So I pushed it back a day, and we went ahead and broke down all the tapes so we could cover not just the fight I was at live in Arizona, but all the fights from Saturday night. So just going to wait a little bit until we get some more people coming in, into the chat. I think one of our first comments is Jake Paul will beat Canelo. So we're off to a hot start in the chat, but let me just get this right. Yes, sir. Guacamole Blank. Thank you for joining. Red Wizard Magic. Jake will beat Canelo. Well, obviously, I don't agree with that, but maybe Canelo should start seriously really taking the fight. He should consider taking that fight because at the end of the day, it's prize fighting, and Jake Paul might actually present the biggest payday for Canelo. And when fighters talk about taking the easiest fight for taking the least amount of risk for the biggest reward possible, I can't think of any fight that would encapsulate that more perfectly for someone than Canelo looking at Jake Paul. He could probably make more money fighting Jake Paul than he could fighting David Benavidez. And he would knock Jake Paul out probably to the body. I just would always see Canelo finishing him to the body, and he'd make a ton of money, and he'd probably be celebrated by people not just in boxing but in combat sports for doing it. And so Jake Paul wants to fight. I think Canelo should seriously consider taking it at some point. You know, as serious as I take boxing, and no one takes it more serious than Canelo these days. Very serious and focused man and fighter. But if the people are willing to throw piles of money at him for an easy fight, he might, and especially since Canelo took a step back this year and fell off a half step from his peak in 2021 and in 2020 against Callum Smith, maybe go ahead and while you're resting from such a busy schedule the last 24 months, go ahead and get an easy payday and beat up Jake Paul in a big fight. That would and also some people would say that would restore order, right? That put an end to the circus. So something to consider for Canelo Alvarez. Canelo needs to change up his style. He needs to stick and move and not be flat-footed. I disagree. Canelo, once he found himself on the front foot, is when he peaked. Canelo, when he was more of a boxer puncher at 154 pounds, I think was less effective than once he figured out in that second Golovkin fight, stay forward, stay on the front, use all the defense, use all the counters, all the slickness, use your hand speed and skills, but do it on the front foot. Do it going forward. You're shorter than these guys and you're stockier and stronger than these guys. No business languishing on the outside so much. So, no, I disagree with that. So I'm just waiting for the chat to round out, and then we're going to get started with the Z-Cap. And chat, do we start with Jake Paul or do we start with Vasil Lomachenko? Let me see. One for Jake Paul, 2 for Lomachenko, if what we want to start with today. Let's see. Sonny Edwards says he'll beat Jake Paul. I don't know. Hold on. Let's go. One moment, people. Yes, sir. Hello. Huh? Hello? Hello? No. Okay, let me get that. 1-1-1. So everyone's actually picking to start with Jake Paul. Wow, I'm surprised. I thought you guys would say Lomachenko. Matt's Fight Corner. Thank you, brother, as always, for the support and for the $5. Oh, we got another phone call. 1 second. Let me answer this. Hello. I still can't hear you. Oh, hold on. Yo, go ahead. Hello? Is this Ashton Kutcher? It's not, but I am getting a lot of calls. Hello. Yeah. Now I can. Yep. Mm-hmm. No, it's connected. Just okay. All right. Well, apparently, guys, dealing with some choppy Wi-Fi, dealing with some choppy image quality, but I guess you guys will rock with me through it, obviously. But so $5 for my Matt's fight corner. Thank you, brother. We kind of owe Jake Paul. He has kind of made boxing at least interesting this year with so many disappointments. We need consistency at least. But if someone said, "Am I being punked right now?" No, you're being punched. This is the punch show, kind of like punked because I do look like Ashton Kutcher. People say, but no, here's the problem though with Jake Paul. You said we're kind of over Jake Paul, but at least he's made boxing interesting this year. He actually closes the year with the most significant boxing pay per view. Oh no, I get Crawford Avanesian on BLK Prime. Actually, might be in the boxing world is more significant because it's Terrence Crawford and not Jake Paul. But it's not going to do the numbers Jake Paul did Saturday night. Even though I don't know if those numbers are what they were against Tyron Woodley, because like you said, kind of over Jake Paul. He's maybe squeezed all the juice he can out of facing the faded former MMA guys route. Although I still think he can make some money with Nate Diaz, and he could really still make some money with Conor McGregor in a boxing match. And I think he beat Conor McGregor in a boxing match too. But I do think the numbers are tapering down right now off of where they were in the first Tyron Woodley fight. It remains to be seen. It wasn't a sellout in Arizona. I was there. It was reported about 12K bought tickets, and that's an arena that's seated, I think, around 18 to 20K. So he didn't sell it out. And so the numbers are tapering off a little bit there. But and I'll get to Jake's fight in a minute. And it was actually a pretty decent fight. It was by far the most entertaining fight of Jake Paul's boxing career. And Anderson Silva, even though he's 47 years old, brought to the ring more skill and more setups and more feints and more nuance than anyone else Jake has fought. And Jake wore some shots well. He took a lot of right uppercuts on the inside from Anderson Silva, and he wore them well. He showed some whiskers. He showed a chin, took a lot of those right uppercuts on the inside from Anderson Silva. And he settled down in the second half of the fight, did Jake Paul. But before getting to the fight, it's not. I don't want to get carried away and get it was a decent fight and both guys showed hard and get away from the reality that this is not good for boxing closing out 2022. Showtime has really hardly anything. They have Sebastian Fundora on the schedule and that's it. They have nothing else on the schedule. It looks like they're not going to be able to secure Garcia and Tank Davis. Terrence Crawford walked away from the table on the Errol Spence fight. So it's not a good state of affairs for boxing that the most significant pay-per-view we're going to close the year with is Jake Paul. A year ago, Jake Paul closed the year with a pay-per-view with Tyron Woodley, but so did Esau Cruz and Tank Davis had a big pay-per-view to finish the year. Caleb Plant and Canelo had a huge pay-per-view to finish the year. Fury and Wilder fought in this month, October of last year. Crawford and Porter fought in November, around this time last year. So we had about 4 legitimate pay-per-views in boxing as opposed to 0. We had 4 legit pay-per-views last year along with 1 Jake Paul show. And this year it's just the Jake Paul show. So that's not good for boxing. That's not good. Even though, to give Anderson Silva and Jake Paul credit, they gave by far the most entertaining fight of Jake Paul's career so far. But that's not what for me, I think moves the needle. It's not what's good for boxing. We can't rely on Jake Paul to finish out the most important quarter of the year, quarter 4. So that, I don't want to get carried away with giving Jake too much credit for beating a 47-year-old Anderson Silva when the larger picture in boxing isn't good to finish 2022. Hopefully, and there's a good chance it sets up a big 2023. You know, all the fights that weren't able to get done in a timely manner for this year, that a number of them get done for 2023. Maybe you get Tank and Ryan 2023, Spence and Crawford 2023, Plant and Benavidez 2023, etc. But boxing failed in the final quarter of really after Tank fought Rolly, and we had Devin fight Kambosos twice overseas. But really after Rolly and Tank, the schedule got really thin. I mean, we had Usyk and Joshua, but a majority of the big fights came overseas and not here in America after the Tank pay-per-view with Rolly. But on to the fight with Jake Paul. Vishal Kumar said, I don't know, man. It's disrespectful to the real boxers out there. Paul's getting paid in a sport he doesn't belong. Yeah, and he's getting the budget too, you know. But he said after the fight, and I told you guys before, in the months before this fight, I likened Jake Paul to a Paris Hilton, a Kim Kardashian, in that they were never really famous for one particular thing. That, you know, he did some acting, but he's not really an actor. He's done some music, but he's not really a musician. He's kind of famous for being famous. And that trend was started by Paris Hilton and Kim Kardashian in the beginning of the 2000s. And after the fight, Jake said, fuck it, call us the Kardashians. We're the new Kardashians, Jake Paul and Logan Paul. So he actually agrees with what my assessment was of his fame as well. The problem is you can't get mad at Jake Paul. You have to look at society for why they want to keep tuning in. Society, for whatever reason, isn't as drawn to a top championship fight as they are Jake Paul and his antics and his personality and all that. So that's an indictment, not just on boxing, but on society for what they're attracted to. Society can be hypocrites sometimes because society told you they hated that man, Floyd Mayweather, right? But when it came time to spend money, they didn't spend money on the quiet guy who showed up and just worked hard and looked to fight and feed his family. That's not really what interests them and brought their intrigue. They said they hated Floyd, but that was the guy they gave all their money and time and attention to. So people say one thing and then sometimes do another. People say they hate Jake Paul, even myself included. I'll take the criticism from you guys. I liken him to the Kardashian. I mentioned how he's famous just for being famous, and it's this phenomenon that took over in the 2000s. But then on fight night, I was in my seat trying to make some money, covering this stuff. And I can't call it a circus because it was a legit good fight. And your first reaction when Jake gets out of the ring isn't to chastise him or to point out the big picture and what this means in boxing and society. He just got out of the ring and fought a hard 8 rounds and took some hard right uppercuts and showed the stamina to get the knockdown in the 8th round when he needed it to make it to the fight clear. So, you know, credit to him. And he said after the fight, this was the first fight he was ever comfortable in. And I saw that. I saw him make adjustments and thinking there in the second half of that fight once he settled down. As for how I scored the fight, I had it 5-3 for Jake Paul. I scored rounds 2, 5, and 6 for Anderson Silva. I had it 4-3 for Jake heading into the 8th. And then Jake gets the knockdown. Anderson Silva was taking chances, knew he needed that round to have a chance on the scorecard. He closes the gap with Jake. He starts shoe shining to the body. Then he tries to get in there again. And Jake actually shoe shine to the body a little bit, then finishes with the right hand and drops him. Wins the fight 77-74 on my card, 5-3. So, you know, so for what it was, an 8-rounder between a guy with 4 professional fights and the guy with 5 professional fights, it was a good fight. It had ebb and flow. It had momentum swings. Jake was up 3-1 after 4. Then Silva gets back into the fight, winning 5 and 6. So, you know, there was, for what it was a decent fight. But guys, it's a sad state of affairs in the sport to finish the year when I'm here saying an 8-round fight between 2 guys with 8 professional fights combined in 8 professional fights in an 8-rounder. It's a sad state of affairs when there's no other significant title fights that are on pay-per-view. I mean, Crawford Avenizzi on BLK Prime, and I'm here talking about Jake Paul. Something's not right. Something's wrong. You know, with the state of affairs of what's going on. You know, there's so much speculation. Why? You know, ESPN, outside of when they did Wilder Fury, which was a joint thing with PBC helping to carry the weight. Outside of that, they don't really do big pay-per-views in America anymore. They've scaled down a little bit and are looking to turn smaller profits instead of spending big money on guarantees and potentially losing money. Showtime, meanwhile, apparently only had the budget to afford Sebastian Fundora and Jake Paul, so that's not good. And there's rumors of Paramount Plus acquiring them, and so but that's all rumors too. And then DAZN has lost billions of dollars. So boxing needs to take a look in the mirror and restructure some things. Maybe they need to take us fans' advice, like we've been telling them for years. Make better fights, make more competitive fights, and more viewership will go up higher. But we'll see. To close out 2022, compared to how we close, it could just be a bad end of the year because 2021 finished out beautifully. But think about why it finished out beautifully. Fury Wilder 3, a top-ranked guy against a PBC guy. Crawford versus Porter, a top-ranked guy against a PBC guy. Even Canelo Plant, a guy in Canelo who has fought on non-PBC platforms for 8 years, or 7 years at the time, fought on HBO, then fought on DAZN with Matchroom. And so even though that for that one fight, that wasn't a cross-pollination fight, that was a Showtime pay-per-view and an all PBC fight where, Canelo signed with them for that fight. In a way, you could look at it as a cross-pollination fight because it's a guy who had been fighting on separate platforms for 8 years, taking him on. So that's the memo here. This year, none of those deals could, Golden Boy and PBC couldn't come to an agreement for Tank and Ryan. Crawford couldn't do what Canelo did a year ago, leave his promoter he was with for one fight and make a big fight with the PBC like Canelo did with Plant. Crawford failed to do that with Spence or vice versa, however you look at it. So it would seem we were right. If you want more viewership and bigger fights and bigger pay-per-views, you guys are going to have to work together and give us what we want. What do you know? The customer's always right? So we'll see if the promoters eat their slice of humble pie with how the quarter finished. None of them are going crazy. Top Rank at least, has a show in the Garden with Lopez, but with Pedraza. But so hopefully, with the lack of big shows ending the year, the big three, Top Rank, DAZN, and PBC, they don't like how the year ended as much as we did, and hopefully that gives them a sense of urgency to give us more of what we want. We'll see. Don't bring MMA into this because boxing is dead. Well, Fabian, boxing isn't dead enough to where you're on a boxing YouTube channel spending $2 to say hello. And I appreciate your $2, Fabian, but boxing has rescinded itself more and more into the niche genre since the 80s, really. So, and it continues to do itself no favors. So MMA has leapfrogged boxing in the public consciousness. I'd be a fool not to admit that. I don't like MMA. I love boxing, but MMA is the combat sport people think of when they think of fighting these days, not boxing. I'll acknowledge that. And Jake Paul is taking advantage of MMA having a bigger fan base than boxing by fighting MMA fighters in boxing. So you are right, but boxing isn't dead. Still globally, I think you could argue boxing's the most global sport behind soccer, so but boxing's got to get its act together for sure. So that's that really for Jake Paul. I can't hate the player. I gotta hate the game. I gotta blame society and the society for being interested in the Kardashians and the Paris Hilton and the Jake Pauls, rather than when we were interested in Lindenberg traveling the world in record in less than 90 days, or Howard Hughes creating airplanes and all those, those days are long gone when we admired people with the most talent and true accomplishment that advanced society forward and inspired us and all those kinds of things. It just became about fame for the sake of fame and all that kind of thing. And you can't get mad at Jake Paul for being a smart enough young man to capitalize on that. And he understands human psychology and how to manipulate people with his media savvy to tune in and to watch. That's something guys like Floyd and Donald Trump did too. And that's smart on their part. You have to take a look at why is society set up towards that's what they want to consume, rather than that which is, let's get biblical, righteous or whatever. But that's not on them. That's on society for what they want to consume. But Jake, that was the best fight he's had so far. Shout out to Anderson Silva, who fought a very good fight for being a guy who's not a long-time professional boxer. He didn't go in there like He didn't look like some MMA, chump, for lack of a better word. He boxed well, given his age and his experience. And then for Jake Paul, the little adjustments he keeps doing. He bends down when he throws his jab, always throws the up jab. He doesn't really throw the jab from the high guard, throws the up jab, and he dips down to his right when he throws it. He lunges, and there's guys who would take advantage of him lunging sometimes and things like that. But he tries to do that Andre Ward jab and dip down to the right as you throw the up jab from the hip. He likes to bend down and look at the midsection a lot to kind of fool the guy, to bring the guy's eyes down, and then he brings the right hand over the top. So he's learning little tricks with BJ Flores that disguise the right hand, and he's improving. But boxing, last year when I had all those great fights to cover, Canelo Plant, Fury Wilder 3, Crawford Porter, even Esau Cruz and Tank was a good fight. We had Stephen Fulton versus Brandon Figueroa on regular Showtime. David Benavidez against Kyron Davis in Phoenix. So compared to last year, it's pitiful how we're ending the year in boxing. But I can't blame Jake Paul for that. So, but to move on, and I'll read a couple comments before we move on to Lomachenko. Pugilism says boxing will never die. It's the ultimate crossover platform. Just need two people with hands to get in the ring. It's up to fans and consumers on who they decide to follow and enjoy consuming. Although the fans can't consume the fights they want if they're not actually made. It's hard for fans to show we will support the fights we want if you don't actually make them in the first place. So now I think I'm gonna kept seeing the way Silva was getting. Those who say boxing is dead are youngsters that are like 18 and just got into boxing. Oh, and then shout out to Ashton Silva on the undercard. Had a first round knockout in the co-main event from Long Beach, 8-0, 8 knockouts. Not some kid that's just another YouTuber or a personality and Jake Paul knows him. This is a legit prospect Jake Paul has under his umbrella. Ashton Silva, he knocked out Braulio Rodriguez just as clean as Ryan Garcia did. Garcia knocked this guy out 4 years ago in Madison Square Garden. Ashton Silva took 1 minute to get him out of there, slipped 3 or 4 shots beautifully, and then boom, right uppercut, and that ended it. Legit prospect, 18 years old from Long Beach, California. Ashton Silva deserved that. So let's get to Lomachenko. Let's get to the world class caliber boxing over on ESPN. Vasyl Lomachenko. I told you guys, I've been saying since May of 2021, if not before that, I've been saying for a year and a half, if and when Lomachenko and Devin Haney fight, Devin Haney's going to beat him. And I now everybody's saying that Sunday morning after Lomachenko's fight with Jermaine Ortiz, a fight that I feel Lomachenko was clutch. He was down 5 rounds to 3, 77-75 on my card heading into the 9th. And he sweeps all 4 of the final rounds to win the fight 115-113. That was clutch. He's not peak Lomachenko anymore. No, I have no qualms about saying that. And Lomachenko has been in a steady gradual decline the last 3 or 4 years. It's just that Nakatani fight was a aberration. That Nakatani fight, Lomachenko looked spectacular because he fought with so much spite that night. He had so much spite left over from the Lopez fight that he was really something that night against Nakatani in June of 2021 last year. But if you take away that Nakatani fight, it's been a gradual decline since he's come up to lightweight. And against Jermaine Ortiz, that continued to show because you saw against Richard Comey, who he dominated, that spite was gone. He had Richard Comey hurt in the 7th round. He looks at the ref to let him off the hook. And not only does he not finish Comey in the 7th, he winds up going all 12 rounds with Comey. And so that's when I knew Lomachenko had come back to earth, and that Nakatani fight, all that spite he was fighting with from the Lopez fight, he couldn't sustain it going forward. And Nakatani is a bad defensive fighter who Lomachenko was able to tee off and look good against. But since moving up to lightweight, because Lomachenko is to me an all-time great at 130. Since moving up to lightweight, he slowed down a little bit. And in the 10th round, when he had his best round against the 9th and 10th, he had his best rounds against Jermaine Ortiz. Lomachenko turned it up to his 3rd gear. But before in the 10th round, against Pedraza. Now, you guys follow me. He dropped, I believe, Luke Campbell in the 10th round. He dropped Pedraza in the 10th round when he opened up with almost 100 punches a round in both of those rounds. He came on strong against Teofimo late in the fight. 10th round was maybe his best round in that fight, too. His 10th round, sure enough, he showed up in the 10th round, the championship round, and he takes it. But he was in third gear compared to his fifth gear. Just go back and compare the 10th round last Saturday night against Jermaine Ortiz to the 10th round against Campbell and against Pedraza, where he turned it up and threw 100 punches. He didn't get close to 100 punches in the 10th round. So at 34, 35, he couldn't get shift all the way to fifth gear. He could only get to about third gear, and it was enough against this guy to pull it out. It was clutch. He came down and won those last 4 rounds to win the fight. There was no robbery there. Ortiz was a very plucky underdog, fought with great determination. I was outworking Lomachenko in the first 8 rounds, but he didn't have enough energy and didn't have enough skills with Lomachenko in the exchanges. Lomachenko was winning those exchanges, and his fatigue got to him. Lomachenko's feints began to wear on him a little bit. He'd feint him out of position and then punch, whereas in the earlier part of the fight, when he'd feint, Jermaine Ortiz wouldn't bite on it as much or would keep the jab in his face and would keep busy. And I thought Lomachenko had better defense a lot of times. And even when Jermaine was winning those first 8 rounds, and I gave him 5 of the first 8, he was running his hands. Lomachenko was blocking a lot of those shots. He was eating some of them too, but he was more accurate than Jermaine Ortiz throughout the fight. It's just Jermaine was outworking him and had more youth and energy in those first 8 rounds before Lomachenko did enough to take it in the last 4. But like I said, Haney will beat Lomachenko. I said for over a year. Some of you guys who would see me with my man Sean Porter, some of you guys who've already seen me on the Z-Cap here, you guys know I've always picked Haney to beat Lomachenko, and it's no diss to Loma. Loma's a first ballot Hall of Famer in this era. He, to me, I don't think he would have beaten the 130-pounders I grew up with, like Juan Manuel Marquez, Manny Pacquiao, Floyd Mayweather, Eric Morales. I think he might have beaten Barrera. Barrera was small, but he is an all-time great at 130 pounds. At featherweight, he did his thing. He won his belt there. But really at 130 is where I think Lomachenko peaked. But at 35 against Haney, Haney's going to be a welterweight one day. Haney's a huge lightweight now. He rehydrates to 155. You heard Lomachenko joking around after the fight. He's a heavyweight. He's a heavyweight. But I was telling you guys he was too big and too young and too ascending for Lomachenko. Lomachenko has had injuries, is in his mid-30s, and in boxing, usually the higher the weight, the older your prime can be. So in those lower weight classes where reflexes and stamina and punch output are at a premium, you tend to age quicker than you do in higher weight classes. So Lomachenko at 34, 35 has had shoulder injuries and is a guy who started at featherweight. Devin Haney's fought his whole career at lightweight. He's going to be a welterweight, probably even a 154-pounder one day. It was never a hard fight for me to pick. It's just now all of you have seen the light of day that Haney will beat Lomachenko. Now the media, now all the fans are saying Haney beats Lomachenko, but I just want you guys to know I got to talk my shit. I told you guys that as early as May of last year. And that was no diss to Lomachenko, who's going to the Hall of Fame. It's boxing. One guy is young and getting better, and the other guy is old, has had injuries, and is declining. It's not that hard to pick Devin to beat him. Same with Shakur. Shakur would beat him as well. I don't know if he beats Tank anymore either. Before I always gave Loma an edge over Tank because Tank doesn't throw a lot of punches. And I think that Lomachenko in the second half of that fight would take him to deep waters and I think would outwork him and would have won that fight. But even now, I don't know about that. I don't know if Lomachenko, as he's aging, as he's small, as he's had injuries, I don't know if he can beat the Ryan Garcias, the Haneys, the Stevensons. His era may have passed him up by now. He's still a terrific fighter, but his hand speed isn't the same. His work rate isn't the same. He can't get to that 5th gear in the late rounds like he did before. He can only get to gear number 3. And Lomachenko's never been able to fight off the back foot. He can make you miss off the back foot. He can take steps out of range and move his head, keep his hands high, and move while moving his head and make you miss, step out of range, and then step back in range. But he always has to step back in range to punch. He's not a guy who's going to jab off the back foot. He's not going to make you miss and counter. He's going to make you miss, miss, reset, and then come back in, side to side, forward, side to side, forward. Guys, that becomes, as great as he is, and as he's aging and the hand speed isn't what it was and the work rate wasn't that's predictable eventually for a guy like Haney or Stevenson. They know he's not going to punch off the back foot. It's just not what Lomachenko does. He goes off the back foot to get out of range and reset, and then has beautiful angles off the side to side forward. But those, as the athleticism wanes as you age, and the hand speed and the athleticism, those pivots become less zippy and less snappy, and the hand speed is so. He's not beating Devin Haney, but I told you guys that a year and a half. I'm only saying that to earn some trust with you guys, so that you got, you know what I mean? You heard it here first. So, not hating on Lomachenko. I give him props for being clutch down the stretch and winning those 4 rounds when he needed them against a young, hungry kid. But he's not beating Devin Haney. And even he joked around about the size mismatch he's heading into. Devin's going to rehydrate and be 10 to 15 pounds heavier than him. Lomachenko saw a great stat. He's won 9 straight fights against guys with superior height and reach. That's heart. You know, Lomachenko got heart for doing that. And I give him props, man. He is been a great fighter in the sport since he's turned pro, but he's not beating Devin Haney. And I was the first to tell you guys that, and now I think everyone pretty much agrees with me. So and so that, which brings me to my next point about Devin Haney. Your man right here with the Z cap, Sean Zittel was the first, and I know I sound like a douchebag speaking in the third person, but sometimes you got to put yourself over. Max Kellerman said, sometimes if you don't toot your own horn, nobody hears the music. So your boy was the first one to tell you Devin Haney was going to become king at lightweight. And all people could talk about was he got hurt by Linares. Gamboa went 12. He was the first person who couldn't knock out Gamboa. Remember? But I told you guys he was going to be undisputed. He is. I told you guys he'll beat Lomachenko. Now everybody thinks that too. So here's the next one nobody's saying that be the first to tell you. He'll beat Shakur Stevenson. He'll beat Shakur Stevenson. Shakur Stevenson started his career at featherweight. Devin Haney started his career at lightweight. They're both brilliant, intelligent fighters. They both have great hand speed and athleticism. They're both 2 of the hardest guys to land a clean punch on. But one of them's bigger, and that's Devin Haney. One of them's going to be a welterweight and a 154-pounder one day, and the other one's going to basically max out at 140, and that's Shakur. If you go back and watch their sparring, Shakur won the first half of their sparring session. He was outboxing Devin. Devin is not used to getting outboxed. No one outboxes Devin Haney. He's got the great jab and the speed on the defense on the outside. But Shakur Stevenson was. As sharp as Devin is through the center, Shakur is sharper. No one's sharper than Shakur with the 1-2, with the straight line shots, right? So he was out sharpshooting Devin on the outside as teenagers in their sparring session. Halfway through the session, Devin began to impose his size. He went forward. Like I talked about with Canelo, how he used to be boxer puncher at 54, and then he found out he was best off on the front foot in that second Golovkin fight, and ever since. Haney figured out, I'm better off going forward. And he began to go to the body. He began to punch around, like he swept around to the body and set up power shots up top. He stopped trying to sharpshoot on the outside with Stevenson, where he had the advantage. And Devin found some answers in the second half of that sparring there. And that's why that fight will be more entertaining than you think. It won't, it'll be tense the first 4 to 5 rounds. It'll be posturing, defensive posturing, beautiful work of the jab on the outside from both guys. But in the second half of Haney-Stevenson, you're going to get a fight because Haney's going to come forward because he has to. His advantage isn't on the outside trying to sharpshoot with Shakur and his master distance control. His advantage is he's a bigger guy. And I think you'll see Haney be the aggressor against Stevenson in the second half of that fight. And Haney beats Stevenson. 2 great boxers, but one is bigger than the other. That's how I see that happening. And like Floyd and Zab Judah, when they fought, the difference between them wasn't talent. Floyd was more skilled than Zab, but really the big difference between them was Floyd's dedication and his mentality. He didn't drink. He didn't smoke weed. Zab did some of those things, and it showed up in the fight. There's nothing like that to choose. Both of these guys are super dedicated, super intelligent, super skilled. I just think Haney's bigger than him. So there you heard it first. Devin Haney beats Shakur Stevenson. You were the first to hear it from me that he'd be lightweight champion. You were the first to hear it from me that he'll beat Lomachenko if they fight. and you're the first to hear it from me. He'll beat Shakur Stevenson if and maybe when they fight. I don't know if they're really going to make that fight. I hate the era of over marination, but that fight maybe does deserve a little extra marination, Stevenson and Haney, because if they were to fight right now, it's not a big fight. Devin beating Lomachenko helps build it up and make it a bigger fight, but I still don't know if it's ready right then and there. But if it does happen, Haney will win. So let's see what you guys got to say about that. Now you're a fool, says Mo Abdullam. If Loma starts early, let me see that. Let me get back to that comment about if Loma starts early, because that's an if that's just not going to happen. Lomachenko doesn't start early. Neither does Terrence Crawford. They just don't. Not fast starters. Great finishers. Lomachenko's great down the stretch. Well said by G. Martinez. I give respect to anyone who puts on gloves and fights in the ring, so I give Jake some respect for fighting, but in a way, he always shows he's getting better. I mean, he's not beating Canelo or becoming a champ, says G. Martinez. Right, so you give him props for getting in the ring, but you keep perspective about it. Exactly. They'll meet at 140. Right, they might meet at 140, Haney and Stevenson. Mo Abdullam says, stop. Shakur will walk a lot of them down, and Shakur is a silver medalist. Kevin Knight says, predicting Haney to be a champion ain't that rare. Yeah, but Kevin, nobody was saying that. Nobody was saying that he was going to become king of lightweight. Everybody, Teofimo had beaten Lomachenko. People loved Lomachenko, Tank Davis. But I was the one saying, no, he's going to be undisputed. And he is. All people... Haney's stock was down after the Linares and Gamboa fights. All people could talk about was he had no punching power and that he was chinny. So I don't think if you polled most people after the Linares fight, they were saying Devin was going to make a run at number one pound for pound and begin a run at that and become undisputed at lightweight. So, so Gustavo Antonio Morales says, what do I think of William Zepeda? I guess with that, we'll jump to that fight. Got a chance to watch Zepeda and Diaz. Props to Zepeda for just being on his P's and Q's from the opening bell. He got dropped in a fight in Mexico 2 or 3 fights ago where he just came in naked without the jab, came in sloppy, got dropped in the first round, and went the distance with a guy he was supposed to look impressive with and blow out. So tonight, fighting the best, or Saturday night, facing the best guy he's ever fought in his career in Jojo Diaz. He came in with a sharp jab and put Jojo on his heels in the first round and never looked back. His conditioning, he threw over 1,500 punches to Jojo throwing just 600. It wasn't so much Jojo didn't have the skills to beat Zepeda. At times, he had some beautiful work, and he'd catch and shoot in mid to close range beautifully, but got off to a bad start. He got put on his heels, put on the back foot. Took him a couple rounds to settle into his style, staying in mid to close range, keeping his feet planted and catching and shooting. And Zepeda just was in better condition than him. Diaz fighting at a weight he really shouldn't be at. He's not a real lightweight. And the fight was not even at light. It was technically at light welterweight, 137 pounds. So he didn't have the size and the conditioning of Zepeda. It wasn't so much the skills. It was that Zepeda, who did sharpen up his skills. He came out with a beautiful jab in round 1, jab to the body, then jabbed up top, and it set up combinations. And he set the tone for the night and never looked back. Diaz got himself into the fight as it progressed, started catching and shooting well, but it wasn't enough. He wasn't in the kind of shape Zepeda was in, and he's not at that weight. Zepeda's a natural lightweight. And Zepeda is just another good lightweight in a division full of good lightweights. He's not a boogeyman or anything. He's not someone that's making Devin Haney and Shakur Stevenson and Tank Davis, sweat and hear footsteps at night. He's just another good lightweight, like Frank Martin, like Michelle Rivera, like Esau Cruz, like Rolly Romero. He's another contender in what's probably the most loaded division in boxing at lightweight. So, Zepeda did his thing. Diaz still showed good skills, but it's just too small at that weight and didn't have the conditioning to keep up. So Matias is a beast too, right? Subriel Matias from Puerto Rico. Daniel Chambers says Devin Haney versus Shakur Stevenson will be closer than people think. Won't be so easy for Shakur the way people are eating. No, Devin's going to beat him. You know, Shakur doesn't open up with combinations, and Devin hasn't opened up with too many combinations recently either. But Devin in the Kambosos fight, he let his hands go more than we've seen Stevenson do, except for the Jamel Herring fight, pretty much, and kind of Joet Gonzalez. But no, Haney showed some offense in that Kambosos fight. He shot off some beautiful lead right hand counters, some check hooks, and I think he has more of an arsenal offensively. Shakur is just so incredible with the straight line shots, with the 1 and the 2. He could beat guys off the jab and the cross alone, just by how good he is at controlling at long range that distance. And he has that check hook too that he dropped Oscar Valdez with, the check right hook. But I think Devin's a little more creative offensively, and he's bigger. So I got Haney winning that fight. You heard it here first. I haven't heard anyone say Devin's going to beat Shakur. I hear everyone favoring Shakur. So just like you heard it here first, that Devin will beat Lomachenko, he'll beat Stevenson too. Haney lacks power, says Mo Abdalam. Yeah, but Stevenson isn't a big puncher either. And Haney, yeah, he did. It was surprising the amount of clean, hard shots he was hitting Kambosos with and couldn't get him out of there or couldn't hurt him. But I do wonder a little bit if that sucked, even though he rehydrates great. I wonder if that sucked down to 35 takes a little something out of him. Not that he'll ever be a true puncher by any means, but I'm curious if once Haney goes up to 40 and 47 and he's not cutting as much weight, if he does punch harder. You know, I wouldn't be surprised. You know, so we'll see. That remains to be seen. But at lightweight, it is surprising how hard he was hitting Kambosos and couldn't really dent him or hurt him or let alone get him out of there. So I'll acknowledge that. But Stevenson isn't a puncher either. So that fight's definitely going the distance. We know that. Pugilism, as a Norfolk, Virginia, DB3 boxing supporter, even recognized nobody from DB3 to all these top names, not volunteering to summon Matias' name. Matias needs Pac-Man support. Oh yeah, Keyshawn is a killer coming up at lightweight. He is the blue chip prospect. If you consider Rivera and Frank Martin still prospects and some other guys, but Keyshawn's the one in terms of the young guys who still have to transition to contender in a world-class level. He is the top guy on the rise at lightweight, Keyshawn Davis. Wale says Devin makes the fight boring. He didn't make the Kambosos fight boring. He didn't just stick his jab in his face for 12 rounds there. He looked to shoot off counters and power shots. And even though he didn't knock him out, he landed a lot of them. He landed, I think, 200 punches in the fight. So down the stretch, especially, the second Kambosos fight was fun to watch. And against Linares, Devin ran his hands beautifully in the first 8 to 9 rounds and put on a clinic of combinations and hitting him with both hands in that fight too. So Devin can be fun to watch too. Gamboa was an awful fight. Santiago before that was a bad fight too. So, you know, like most fighters, has some good fights and some bad ones. So let's see. Someone asked about the Bivol fight. How do I see Bivol and Zurdo Ramirez? Good fight. Zurdo brings the size that Canelo lacked, but he doesn't have the head movement coming forward that Canelo has, so he should be there to be found by Bivol more. I think Zurdo's best work is going to come when he gets Bivol on the ropes, when he drives Bivol on the ropes and can impose his size and body punching with Bivol on the ropes. But I don't think he'll be able to get Bivol to the ropes often enough to win the fight. In the center of the ring, Bivol has a better jab and better defense than Zurdo. Just so fundamentally sound. It's not like he's moving his head a whole lot. It's not like he's using the shoulder roll and slipping and sliding shots, but he's just very good with his feet on knowing when to step out of range. And he knows how to time his jab right when you want to get off. So sometimes the jab works as his defense. It stops you before you were going to get started. And he keeps the hands up so perfect. Catches shots with the high guard extremely well. So got the better jab. I think he's gonna be better in the center of the ring, and I think a majority of the fight will be fought in the center of the ring because Bivol knows how to keep it there. He's got a little bit better defense than Zurdo. Zurdo's bigger, but I got Bivol winning a decision 117, 111, 116, 112. I think Zurdo will have his spots. He'll impose his size when he's able to get Bivol to the ropes, but he won't be able to do it often enough. And I think Bivol beats Zurdo. But great fight. I mean, Zurdo has more professional experience, even though I think Bivol's fought now certainly after fighting Canelo, he's fought better opposition than Zurdo has. But Zurdo is still, despite all those fights, not even 30 years old yet. Even though he was the guy who was a super middleweight champion, he's actually bigger than Bivol. So it's going to be a good fight, but I think Bivol will keep it in the center of the ring, 8 or 9 rounds out of 12, and he'll win the decision. I got Bivol. Tough fight for Bivol. It is. The Eastern European fighters are taking over. That's not quite true, Wale. I can't agree with that because Golovkin has faded. Lomachenko is fading. Kovalev's long gone. Usyk's great, arguably the top pound-for-pound fighter, but there's great fighters from Mexico, United States. We still have as many great fighters as any other country. As great as Usyk is, he's not going to beat Fury, in my opinion. So I don't think Janibek's a good fighter too, and Bivol and Beterbiev and Eastern Europe is just it's there now. It's one of the dominant countries alongside Mexico and the United States and some of the other countries. But I won't say they're just out and out taking over. They lose fights too as well as win them. Devin way bigger than Kambosos, but Stevenson is a different story. It's definitely a different story. It's a much more competitive fight than George Kambosos was able to do with Devin. I don't deny that. But I think Haney's going to win that fight, Fair enough, right? Appreciate you, Wale. No, we don't got to put the clown emoji on Wale. He was just mentioning they're getting busy. And they are getting busy, the Eastern Europeans, but I can't say they're taking over. They got a seat at the table, at the big boy table with the other countries that are established in the sport. Which country will be the next hotbed for the next wave of boxing? Good question. Well, I'm interested to see if the United Kingdom can take off and ascend. They've always been there. They've always, had good fighters, but can they become dominant? Because they're the country that loves the sport the most right now. I think even because Mexico, there is no immediate replacement for Canelo on the horizon right now, and that almost starts to worry me a little bit. Who is going to be the next Canelo? That Salvador Sanchez, Julio Cesar Chavez, to Morales, Barrera, Marquez, to Canelo Alvarez, to who's next? Because whoever was next was already next while that guy was shining. While Chavez was still having big fights in the mid-90s when Barrera was clearly the next guy. Barrera and Morales and Marquez Marquez was having fights with Pacquiao when it was already obvious Canelo was the next guy. So we don't know who the next guy is yet from Mexico, and that concerns me. Like Puerto Rico never quite got its next guy. You assume they would, from Wilfredo Benitez to Wilfredo Gomez to Camacho and Trinidad to Cotto, and then now we got Xander Zayas. Looks like Xander Zayas is here to save the day, but that's something I worry about for Mexico. So, but I don't know. We don't know who the next great boxing country is going to be because it looked like the Philippines was going to take off after Pacquiao, and you get some guys like Ancajas and Casimero, and the Filipino fighters are always explosive and dangerous, but it hasn't taken off behind Pacquiao like they probably would have hoped. So we'll see. Let me see. Someone said, announcement coming from Spence soon. Let's hope it's good. What do I think the announcement from Spence will be? Well, signs point towards Stan Jonas because he's said so many times he's not going to fight Thurman. Boots is just too dangerous for too little of a reward. He's not a world champion. He's not a draw yet. And he might beat you anyways, despite his lack of experience because he's such an electric talent. So Boots isn't going to get that shot. He doesn't want to give Thurman the shot because Thurman didn't want to give him the shot when he was a young, hungry, mandatory challenger. So maybe Stanionis is the fight. Maybe Fundora, maybe a move up to 54, and if he fights Fundora, Fundora already fought Ocampo, and I was here earlier saying Showtime had Fundora still to go on the schedule. They have nothing on the schedule. That really was it, Jake Paul. I forgot Fundora already beat Ocampo a week or two ago. So, but anyways, maybe he moves up and fights Fundora. That's a good fight. It's a non-title fight at 54, but that is a very good fight. Stanionis isn't really a good fight. Stanionis is undefeated. He's earned his way to the mandatory spot, but he'll get outclassed by Spence. Stanionis is straight up and down. He's explosive. He's strong. He's tough, but he comes in with no jab, and Spence has one of the best jabs in the sport, and that alone will dictate the fight for him from there on out. But so it may be Stanionis, but I love what Spence said. Spence, against really the advice, it seems like, of the people around him, is saying, I'm going to circle the block and come back to Crawford. I'm going to let Crawford fight this fucking fight with Avanesian, and then I'm going to come back to the table and say, let's make a fight. And I give Spence a lot of credit for even in defiance kind of the people around him saying, I want to make this Crawford fight. The people around him may be telling him, forget it. The guy walked away from the table. He doesn't really want to do business with Al Heyman and yourself, and he doesn't want to do it. He's full of it. So move on with your career and your life and look to other fights, right? But Spence is saying, it's my career. I'm the one who's going to get the blame at the end of the day if the fight doesn't happen, whether I deserve it or not. So if the fight's not going to happen, I'm going to make it painfully clear to everyone involved it wasn't because of me. And how do I do that? By not letting Crawford off the hook, by not saying, okay, you took that fight, you weren't serious, time to move up to 54 and move on. No, I'm going to come back to your way, and once and for all, we're going to see if you want to make this fight. And I have a hunch that this time, unless Spence is convinced otherwise and he fights Thurman and he moves on in another career path in his career, I actually believe Errol Spence is going to directly kind of negotiate with Terrence in front of all of us, because he's going to want to make it clear to us, the public, this time how serious he's been about making the fight. And I think Errol's going to say to himself, I tried it that way the first time. I tried to just be the fighter and let the business and the suits make the fight happen as I sit back in the cut and let it happen. It didn't work. And I'm going to get the blame for it at the end of the day, not them. So this time, I think you're going to see Errol Spence at Terrence Crawford on Twitter. Did you get the contract? Did you sign it? You're going to see things like that, like the contract sent. So I want an answer. You're going to see Errol be more direct with Terrence this time instead of letting business handle it. And I give Errol a lot of credit for that, because I'll give him the credit of, if the fight doesn't happen the second go round of negotiations, I'm going to put it more on Crawford, unless information comes out that tells us otherwise. But I'm going to give Spence his props, because he seems to be being advised to just move on with his career. And he's the one in defiance of that saying, no, I'm going to come around the block again, and we're going to try to make this fight again, because I'm not going to get the blame if it's not going to happen. And props to Errol for that. So it looks like probably Stanionis at 47 to stay busy as Crawford fights Avanesian. And then Errol seems hell-bent on renegotiating the fight once again with Crawford, and I give him props for that. So make Crawford a legit offer, says Shady Slim. Shady, that's the thing. We have zero transparency from these parties. We don't know what he was offered. For all we know, he was guaranteed a career-high payday and walked away from the table. Or for all we know, what was speculated a couple weeks is true, and that he had a zero flat fee. He had no guarantee, and he was being asked to take a percentage of the pay-per-view. So we don't know if he got a superior guarantee for BLK Prime to fight David Avanesian than what was being offered to fight Errol Spence. We really don't know. We just know that the fight fell apart, and it's hard to play the blame game when we don't have all the information that we need to properly assess the situation. It's frustrating as a boxing guy. So, I think Isaac Cruz is the next Mexican. What do you think? No, I think Cruz is definitely a very good Mexican fighter, but he's not a great fighter. He's a good fighter, not a great fighter, and doesn't have the kind of appeal that Canelo Alvarez or Oscar De La Hoya or Julio Cesar Chavez had. I think he could be a legit draw and one of Mexico's favorite fighters. I think he's becoming that. But no, that's not the guy to take the torch for Mexico going forward. we're still waiting to see that guy. It's not a Ray Vargas. It's not an Isaac Cruz. It's not a Zurdo Ramirez. It has to. We're talking superstar. It has to be a guy that could sell out the MGM twice a year in big fights and be great enough to go heads up with the very best fighters in the world, pound for pound. That's got to be the next guy from Mexico, and we don't know who that is yet, and that's concerning. Cruz is no Salvador Sanchez. Kevin Knight, nobody's no Salvador Sanchez. Julio Cesar Chavez wouldn't be Julio Cesar Chavez if Salvador Sanchez wouldn't have died in 1982. You know, we might be talking about El Gran Campeón de Mexico being Salvador Sanchez and not Julio Cesar Chavez if they had ever fought at 130 pounds. So I feel you on that. Ezio says, in my opinion, Bivol exposes Zurdo and his padded record. Who do I think will be the last man standing out of all the young kings? I think there's a chance they draw blood on each of each other, that they all, some of them have rematches and trilogies. So I think they can all stand at the end of the day like Leonard Hearns and Hagler and Duran, and all have exceptional careers. But I suspect it's Haney. I got my money on Haney because he has the length. He has the length that Davis and Teofimo Lopez don't have. Those are more short, stocky guys. And Devin, with his jab on the outside, can dictate against those guys. He has the length to give them problems, to dictate on the outside behind the jab. And then against a guy like Ryan Garcia, who's actually bigger than him and a bigger puncher, he just has the skill set to disarm Ryan. He just has better defense, better counter puncher than Ryan Garcia. Better timing. Although Ryan, we know Ryan has great timing with that left hook, but Devin's going to dictate off the jab. Jab's the most important punch in boxing, and Devin has the best jab out of all the young guns. Shakur has a good jab too, good southpaw jab, but it's not as long and as rangy as Devin's. So I got Haney based off the best punch in boxing, the jab, the fact that along with Stevenson, he has the best defense. Defense can win championships, and he's longer and bigger than Stevenson, Tank, and Lopez. And then the one guy who matches him in that area in size, Ryan, he's just more skilled than Ryan Garcia and just has better defense than Ryan. So I got Haney. I got Haney coming out on top. I don't think you're going to see Haney lose until he fights at welterweight or 154, or until he fights a guy who comes at him like Maidana and Castillo came at Floyd, just without any respect for what's coming back. But until then, man, he's going to be pretty dominant. It's just going to be hard to put together 6 to 7 rounds to beat him against that length and jab and defense, and counterpunching and speed and athleticism. It's just tough to put 6 to 7 rounds in the bank against him right now. Boxing's not always about who can put together the most spectacular highlight reel or the knockout shot. Sometimes it's just hard to beat. It's hard to put together 7 rounds against a guy like that. Stevenson has better defense, said someone, than Shakur. You might than Haney. Maybe he does, but maybe he doesn't. And Haney has the length and size over Stevenson, and the defense is very close as to who's got it better. I think Shakur has better fundamentals than Devin, but Devin has more sauce. Devin has more of the. Stevenson relies on his 1 or 2 defensive moves, and he could change out of the high guard and catch, and then puts his right hand at his chest and does his own version of his shoulder roll. Because Shakur in that southpaw stance, he doesn't shoulder roll like James Toney or Floyd Mayweather. He has his own version of it, and it has zero wasted motion, and that's maybe why. Maybe I'm giving more credit for Haney for the sauce because he's doing more motion, and Stevenson is just catch, hand at the chest, boom, boom, pop, pop, boom, boom. It's all right there. He doesn't have to do. But Devin shows the shoulder roll. He steps off to the side. He shows the high guard. I feel like Devin shows a little bit more variety, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's better. Fundamentally sound is might be more important. That's a great fight. That's just me observing and analyzing both of them and their skill sets. I think Devin has more sauce, more in the arsenal, but Stevenson hasn't beat in the fundamentals. So it's a great fight when it happens. Pat G says David Morrell fighting some no-name next week. No, Yelesenov, excuse me, tough to pronounce the name, is a gold medalist from Kazakhstan, undefeated. That's a good fight. He's a middleweight, so he's the smaller guy. I expect David Morrell to win, but he's taking on one of them Eastern European guys who had 300-400 amateur fights, won the gold medal, hasn't lost as a pro. That's not a walkover fight for David Morrell. That's a good step up. I like that fight. I expect Morrell to win. He's bigger. He's more athletic, better puncher, but he's in a fight. I like that fight for him next week against Yelesenov. However you pronounce the Kazakh's name. Let's see. Crawford versus Avanesian, Fury versus Chisora, Haney versus Loma, Richard Hutchinson. Thank you, man, for asking. Crawford versus Avanesian. Crawford stops him. Crawford has stopped everyone since the Obama administration. No one's went the distance with him since the summer of 2016. And then the Chisora Fury, Warrington, Lopez. I'll have to come back to that one. Haney, Loma, Haney, Bivol, Ramirez, Bivol, Mayweather, Deji, Yard versus Koyakov, Yard. Anthony Yard, and Eubank versus Farrell. Harlem Eubank versus Farrell. I gotta check that one. Prograis versus Zepeda. I'm giving the edge to Zepeda. I think Prograis having to fight these fringe guys on fringe networks hasn't been good for his development. Zepeda feels to me like a guy where it's going to be third time's the charm. He came up short twice in title fights. But I think he's been honest with himself enough as a man and as a fighter that he's going to make the adjustments and do where he came up short at the first two times. And he's a puncher, even though he's not as athletic and doesn't have the hand speed Prograis has. I think he can do it with timing, and he is a puncher. He has heavy hands to go with his smart boxing brain. It's a tough fight. It's a 50-50-ish fight. Regis Prograis is more athletic, more dynamic than Zepeda, but I think Zepeda's been fighting better opposition since Prograis fought Josh Taylor, and I think he's going to get over the hump third time's the charm kind of thing. I got Zepeda, and then Dillian White against Franklin. UFC appreciates the ebbs and flows of boxing with patience as it develops. Understand guard control. Boxing fans want slap wars with footwork and recognizable names. That's funny. Appreciate. And I said that pugilism in the beginning about the ebbs and flows of the Jake Paul Anderson Silva fight. That was one thing I did appreciate about that fight was the ebbs and flows. Jake won round 1. Anderson won round 2. Jake wins 3 and 4. Anderson wins 5 and 6. And then you get the nice conclusive knockdown to really put a nice conclusion to the fight, to leave no uncertainty who won. So yeah, I did appreciate the ebb and flow in that Jake Paul fight. Where do the Charlos go right now? Most interesting fight for 54 and 60. Jamal has been on the shelf. Yeah, Jamal, it's sad what's happened with Jamal. After Jamal Charlo knocked out J-Rock with one of the most beautiful counter right uppercuts you'll see. It's a highlight you guys have probably seen a million times. If you take away the Derevianchenko fight that happened in the pandemic, it's just been a complete disappointment for a guy who looked like he was talented enough to beat a Canelo Alvarez one day. Jamal had incredible size at middleweight. A great shotgun jab, really was developing one of the great jabs in boxing. Good, powerful right hand, very athletic guy. But then around the time of the Matt Korobov fight, I saw him stiffen up. He wasn't as fluid. That was a tough fight against Korobov. Couldn't get out of the way of the straight left. Then he got his fluidity back against Derevianchenko. He looked very good against Derevianchenko. But besides Derevianchenko, since knocking out J-Rock, it's been very disappointing for Jamal Charlo, man. And by now, at 32 years old, he should have been fought Canelo Alvarez and been in some big fights. He's still undefeated. He's still a guy I want to see in big fights, but he's not going to be in a big fight anytime soon because the next fight he takes is going to have to be to knock off Ring Rust. And it's just been disappointing. Jamal Charlo looked like a guy who was headed for stardom, could talk the talk, could walk the walk. Women liked the way he looked, and he could sell a fight, he could talk, he gets knockouts, but he's been one of the real disappointments in terms of being an underachiever, I think, the last couple of years. And that's not a knock. I'm a Jermall Charlo fan. And then Jermell Charlo, he winds up ascending who we all thought it was going to be Jermall who was going to be the bigger of the two, but it's Jermell. Jermell has cemented himself as one of the all-time great 154-pounders in boxing history. I think he's had only guy who had more title defenses at 54 than Jermell was Terry Norris, who did it over 4 different times holding the belt. He held the belt 3 or 4 times, defended it 15 times. Jermell's had about 10 title defenses. He's the first guy to unify 54 in the 4-belt era. So, and Jermell's taken on Fundora and Tim Tszyu were the 2 meaningful contenders that he could have faced in his division, and he's taken on Tim Tszyu. He'll beat Tim Tszyu, I believe, but Tim Tszyu's a good fighter. That's another fight that continues to cement himself as one of the greats at 54. All that's left to do at 54 after Tim Tszyu would be to fight Sebastian Fundora. Unfortunately, him and Errol Spence will never fight because they're friends. If Terrence Crawford can't do business with PBC for Errol Spence, he'll never get in a ring with Jermell Charlo for the same reasons. And so there's no Crawford and Spence at 54. Fundora, if he were to beat Fundora, that would be some old school undisputed shit. Because undisputed, as my man, the head of FightHype, my man BT always used to explain to me, undisputed used to mean not just winning all 4 belts. It meant clearing out your division 1 through 10, like what Mike Tyson did in the late 80s by beating Pinkland Thomas and Tony Tucker and Bone Crusher Smith and Trevor Berbick. And, they used to eliminate the entire top 10. That Marvin Hagler did that at middleweight. And if Jermell were to knock off Tim Tszyu and Fundora, it'd be old school. He'd have done it like that, not just get all 4 belts, but then take it a step further and beat the remaining contenders in the division after getting the 4 belts. But for Jermell, there's no real path to a super fight. I would love to see Boots Ennis move up to 54 and fight him, but that's not going to happen. Maybe Keith Thurman move up to 54 and fight him, but that'd be beating a kind of fading welterweight. At middleweight, there's no big fight for Jermell. So unfortunately, Jermell's going to have to settle for just being a true king at 54, an all-time great at 54. There's no real path to a super fight for him right now. Teofimo versus Barboza, who you got? Teofimo, even though Teofimo sidestepped, curbed Barboza for an older Pedraza. Barboza was a fresher opponent than Pedraza, although at least Pedraza's Puerto Rican and the fight is in the Garden, and it might make more sense ticket sales-wise from there. But Teofimo is on a different plane talent-wise than Barboza. He was from Cambosis, and Cambosis beat him that night. Hard work beat talent that night. But I think Teo, I expect him to be re-energized and refocused. He got that win over Campa to get his confidence back. I think Pedraza will continue to get his confidence back. And you heard it here again. Teofimo beats Josh Taylor as long as that fight happens. If Taylor beats Catterall in the rematch and Teofimo gets past Pedraza, Top Rank is looking to make that fight. Teofimo says he'll go overseas to make that fight. I got Teofimo in that fight. Teofimo is just an incredible talent. He's an incredible talent who didn't put together 50 to 60% of what he should put together in his loss against Cambosis that night. But I think in his own way, behind closed doors, he's refocusing himself and recalibrating. And I think he'll beat Josh Taylor at 140. And I think if Haney sticks around Top Rank, that's going to be a pay-per-view Top Rank does in the next 24 months, year and a half to 2 years, Haney and Lopez at 140. I think they'll get Haney, the winner of Prograis and Zepeda, and they'll get Teofimo, Josh Taylor, and at some point set up a unification between Haney and Lopez at 140. What do I think needs to be done to make boxing better? It's pretty simple. All you guys have been saying it for over a half decade. Promoters got to work together to make the best fights. And good faith has to be established. Good faith has to be established in boxing in a couple of ways right now. If I'm Eddie Hearn and you're Bob Arum, or if I'm Al Heyman and you're a Bob Arum, whatever, and let's say there's 5 to 6 fights on the table that the fans want to see that we got to work with each other to make happen. And I'm going to be hesitant to make the fight that my guy's probably going to lose, right? So there has to be good faith built up from now on that when the promoter does the right thing and he sends his guy or they come together and they make a fight, that I'll make this fight where your guy's probably going to win, but in good faith, when it's time to make a fight where your guy's probably the underdog and not going to win, you got to come to the table and make that fight too. And that's operating in good faith. And another way people have to operate in good faith in boxing, if these fighters want to fight 3 to 4 times a year and not once or twice, they have to operate in good faith that 2 of those 4 fights might not be for $1 million. You might have to fight for $350K against a subpar opponent, and then fight an average opponent for $600K, and then you get your $2-3 million payday against an opponent you actually deserve $2 to $3 million to be fighting. So I think in good faith, the fighters will have to take less money for lesser fights, and in good faith expect to get paid more money for the right fights. I think promoters in good faith have to make fights where their guy's not favored, in good faith that the other guy will make the fight where his guy is favored. That's something I think needs to be done. And it might take like in the Ryan Garcia Tank thing, Showtime has a great point in that your guy has never won a world title in Ryan Garcia. He's never fought on a pay-per-view guy. Our guy has won world titles, and he's a proven, established pay-per-view commodity who sells out arenas. Your guy has never sold out an arena. He sold 10K plus. He's got great social media following. Apparently, he does good viewership on DAZN. But I understand Showtime and PBC saying, no, man, no. Your guy's never won a belt. He's never been on pay-per-view. If you want to make a big fight, come over here, make the fight. We'll pay him extremely well, and we'll make a big fight. But if it comes down to DAZN and Golden Boy saying, no, we need our cut, we need our network on it too, or no fight, it might take boxing and the people in boxing to say, all right, fuck it then, fine, we'll do it. Because it might come down to either that's got to be the case or no fight made. Because I heard people say it's bullshit because Ryan is signed with Golden Boy, but he's not signed with DAZN. So it's nonsense for Golden Boy and DAZN to try to hold up. Yeah, but that's like saying, when Jamal Charlo could have fought Canelo on DAZN, Jamal Charlo is signed with PBC. He's not signed with Showtime. Yeah, but we understand what that implicates. He's signed with PBC, who is aligned with them. Same thing with Ryan. He's signed with Golden Boy, who is aligned with DAZN. So they're going to do the same thing that they did in that circumstance. They're not going to let their guy go over there. Even when, like Canelo was on DAZN to Jamal Charlo, like Tank is to Ryan on Showtime. Even when he's the A side, we're going to hold our feet in and we're going to demand our network be in on it or it not happen. If people really want the fight to happen, it might have to be a Showzin pay-per-view, Showtime / DAZN pay-per-view, even though I get it. Showtime's the guy with the proven star. So some good faith might have to happen. Good luck with that happening. We'll see if it happens. If the numbers they get on the returns on their in-house fights taper off and they're not good, it might force people to come together even when they don't want to, in a way they don't want to. So we'll see. Let me see before we get out of here. Before I get out of here too, shout out to Katie Taylor, still the undisputed lightweight champion. Did her thing. In the meantime, and now she's open to wanting the Serrano rematch. Serrano, you got to go over to Ireland if you want the rematch. She won the first fight. I know it was close. Could have went either way, but she got the decision. She's the champion. She's the draw. The Irish fans support her like crazy. Serrano's got to go over to Ireland if she wants that rematch. And if that fight's not going to happen, the best fight is Bumgarner. Bumgarner, the queen at 130 against the queen at lightweight. That's a great fight. Bumgarner's a tough style for Katie Taylor. Katie Taylor's never seen nothing like Alicia Bumgarner, and never had to deal with a counterpuncher like that. Serrano was happy to exchange with her. Bumgarner's going to look to counter her when she jumps in with her combinations. But Bumgarner didn't have to face the feet that Katie Taylor brings to the table. Michaela Mayer does not have the athleticism with her feet or the hand speed that Katie Taylor has. So it's something Alicia Bumgarner's never seen before. That's a great fight. Let Bumgarner finish off Choi at 130 and become undisputed. So it's an undisputed versus undisputed fight. And in the meantime, if Serrano can't make it over to Ireland, fight Michaela Mayer, because that's still a great fight. Michaela Mayer still gave a great account of herself. She needs to move up. She's a big 130 pound. Let her move up. Let her go to Ireland. Michaela said she'll go to Ireland. And how funny would it be if Michaela could pull off an upset and beat Katie Taylor, grab all those belts and tell Alicia, now you don't want to do. Are you sure you don't want to do the rematch now? Now that I'm the undisputed at 135, I don't know if Michaela could pull that off. With Taylor's superior hand speed of feet and hand, but if Katie Taylor's not going to get the Serrano rematch, and Serrano doesn't fancy going overseas, and while Bumgarner still got her business with Choi to figure out, let's see Michaela Mayer take a trip over to Ireland for Katie Taylor next. But so yeah, shout out to Katie for still being undisputed. So yeah, man, that's about it. What about Lara versus Danny Garcia? It's a tough fight for Danny, but at the same time, Lara is older, slower, and the legs aren't there anymore. Very true. I still would favor Lara. Lara's a guy who has carried his power all the way up to middleweight. Stopped Spike O'Sullivan, stopped LaManna in one round. His left hand has looked very good power-wise at 160 pounds. So you're dealing with a guy who hasn't really carried his power up the way he did at 140 pounds against a guy in Lara who is sitting down on his punches kind of better than ever right now with that straight left hand. I would have Lara in that fight. I don't think Danny is a true threat at 54. I think he's still good, still has juice in the tank, but I don't think he's a real threat to become a champion at 54. Certainly not 60 either. So yeah, man, I think that about wraps up my thoughts for the day. If there's anything you guys want to throw my way before I get out of here, but that's really about it. What should Clarissa Shields do next? I mean, she's ahead of the game. She was a step ahead of all of us by jumping to MMA already because ain't nobody going to beat her in boxing. She's beaten the best middleweights and junior middleweights out there already. The undisputed super welterweight champion, Franchon Cruz-Dezurn, she beat her in her debut. She beat her in her pro debut. She's double lapped at middleweight. She's undisputed twice at middleweight because she became undisputed at middleweight so early in her career, and then she left the weight class to become undisputed elsewhere, and then came back and became undisputed again. So Marshall was the most dangerous middleweight out there. She knocked her off. Christina Hammer brought the best jab at middleweight and very technically sound, and she disarmed and beat her up. Franchon Cruz-Dezurn is undisputed 54. She beat her in her debut. She's beaten a number of contenders. All that's left to do is to do what Holly Holm did and conquer MMA, you know? So she's a step ahead of all of us. She already kind of made that move, and that's all that's left to do, man. She conquered boxing. She can continue to reign and dominate and fight the best fighters that are available, and I imagine she will continue to do that. But as a grown woman, outside of getting pregnant and being a mother, she's kind of done everything she can do already, other than just go to MMA and become, you know, a great MMA fighter. But in boxing, she's like the New York Yankees, mission accomplished. Yeah, the Yankees still play baseball and they still try to win the World Series every year. But for all intents and purposes, they won the sport of baseball. She's won the sport of female boxing. It's victory laps from here on out. So yeah. But I think that about wraps it up. Thank you guys for joining. Again, in conclusion, you know, no diss to Jake. It's not his fault. Boxing is as fucked up as it is to finish 2022. Solid 8-round scrap with Anderson Silva. Good ebb and flow. He's getting better and settling down in the ring. Lomachenko, he's going to make the Hall of Fame one day. He's an all-time great at 130, but he's slowing down, and he's not going to beat the young guns like Haney and Stevenson. But good on him for being clutch enough to win those last 4 rounds against Ortiz to beat a young gun who was hungry that night. You know, Zepeda, good lightweight, another in a long list of tough lightweights in the division. And that about wraps it up, man. Thank you guys for joining the Z-Cap. And I'll be back live with a round by round for Zurdo and Bivol. I think I might come live the day before the fight with a final analysis and prediction of Zurdo and Bivol. And then of course the Z-Cap after Zurdo and Bivol wraps up, and David Morrell's fight as well. So keep it locked in on FightHype, and that's about it, man. Catch, bang. Okay. Thanks, guys.